Hi, my name is Demi, and this is how I would product and direct my showing of Oedipus. So first, starting with the theatrical space, I would use a thrust stage. There's an image below in front, and I originally really liked the black box space, but I felt like it was too small for my production, and I felt like this would have been the perfect size for it. Also, I like the thrust, how like the stage kind of goes out at the audience, which I feel like that would kind of connect with the audience more. Also, just have it more in front of your face, and you're kind of still like in the small space, but I would use the thrust stage. For visual lighting, I would do for my visuals, I would do, first of all, for lighting, like a really like shading, gloomy kind of vibe for most of it to kind of set the tone of how like the city is like physically plagued by sickness and Oedipus's doings. And I also, it's not in color, but I can also link an image of it. But just like this broody, gloomy lighting. And towards the end, when Oedipus figures out what he's actually done and like the consequences of his actions, I will switch to a like bright and red harsh lighting, which also doesn't show, but I can link an image, a like proper image of it. But it would switch to this dark and harsh lighting to show like how he's kind of in this like his headspace and like kind of to represent like the blood and the murder that's going on in the city. Also, it's just harsher, and I feel like it will like draw the audience's attention more. And then towards the end, also for props, I would use daggers. So for when I can get into it more when I bring up the quote, but for Oedipus, he would, when he's talking about his punishment and like gouging out his eyes, I would have him hold props as daggers as props, and kind of like close to his eyes, but you have members of the chorus kind of like lightly dancing around him, trying to stop him from it. And then another prop I'll use are like glasses of like fake wine, and just use like water and red dye. But there's a quote I also pulled out later about the chorus singing about like tyranny and the Oedipus's like doings. That I'll have the chorus sing that or like mum it, and they would dance it and kind of spill it around the show, how like the arrogance of it all. Yeah. And then to get into my characters or my cast, for Oedipus Rex, I would cast Christian Bale. I feel like he's really good at playing really serious characters, and I've seen like some of his movies, how he's able to like quickly adapt to different characters like that. There's an image, Christian Bale. For Jocasta, I would use Phoebe Waller-Bridge. She does have a history in theater. She's from the UK. I've loved her productions and her books, and I feel like it would be really different because she's more into comedy, but I would like to see her do this role, and I just feel like she's a very like good look for it. For Tiresias, I would use Samuel L. Jackson. Again, he's a well-known actor, and I feel like he knows how to play serious characters, and I feel like he just kind of seems like he would be good at playing the role of kind of keeping things like settled and figuring out what's going on. Here's the images: Samuel L. Jackson, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and then lastly for Creon, I would play Paul Edward Giamatti. He's also one of my favorite actors, and I feel like he has a background in theater, but one of his movies, The Holdovers, I feel like kind of was inspiration for me picking him for this role, because he can get into like a really deep space, and I feel like and like can really connect with your feelings. So I feel like that will be good for the play and the audience. For the chorus, I said that I will make the chorus appear as like a mix of middle-class citizens and like poor citizens to have it like resonate with the audience. And it'll also, by using like people of color and like lower like the lower classes, I feel like it could kind of resonate with the audience and show like the political viewpoints and like the like political levels in hierarchy. And it would kind of show that they're not really as important as the main characters. But yeah, I would mainly use women to show that, and I think it will also be cool to use women because this play has dramatic irony, so like the audience knows more, and it will make the chorus say things very blunt, and the chorus would say things very bluntly and obvious since it is to us, and I feel like that would kind of just be a little play because women know it all, stuff like that. For my music, I would use kind of like modernish because I do want this play to have like a vintage, older feel, but I would use a few modern composers. I can link the audios, but for example, I'll use Emile Mussery and use tracks similar to Infinite Love, or I would use the composer Clint Maxwell and something similar to Perfection, which is from Black Swan, and I really like that song because or the symphony because it kind of goes all over the place, and I feel like that would be good towards the end when he's kind of figuring out like what's going on and like what he's actually done. For diction, I would use, since it's older, like set way later, I would use like Old English, so like similar to like the UK sort of sound, and it kind of contributes to that old-timey feel. And yeah, and then to go into my quotes, the first quote is from scene 1, and he says, as for the criminal, I pray to God, whether it be a lurking thief or one of a number, I pray that that man's life be consumed in evil and wretchedness. And as for me, this curse applies no less. If it should turn out that the culprit is my guest here, sharing my hearth, and that's lines 29 through 34 from scene 1. And I said that these plays show the dramatic irony of the play because he's saying that he has like ill intentions and like hatred, and he's wishing this against the murderer, but he's ultimately gonna bring it upon himself, which you see later. And connecting this back to dramatic irony, like the audience knows that he's saying this, but it's literally towards himself, like because the audience knows he's the one who's actually killed his father and plagued the city, and he eventually doesn't have like a bright future. The next quote is, the tyrant is a child of pride who drinks from his great sickening cup recklessness and vanity until from his high crest headlong he plummets to the dust of hope. That strong man is not strong, but let no fair ambition be denied. May God protect the wrestler for the state and government and calmly policy who fear God and on his ordinance wait. And I was saying how this quote by the chorus calls out like arrogance and pride that many rulers like Oedipus can have. And again, this kind of connects to like the political status with the chorus and like people in power, just showing that. And I will have the chorus kind of like dance around almost and like do like kind of almost weird looking dances, and I'll have them hold like wine to show like the cup and just kind of dance around with it, spilling it everywhere to show this arrogance. And here there's some religious imagery where they're saying how like rulers should have faith and act morally under God while following the divine law. And this was in scene 3, I believe. And then my third quote I chose was, this punishment that I have laid upon myself is just. If I had eyes, I do not know how I could bear the sight of my father when I came to the house of death, or my mother, for I have sinned against them. For I sinned against them both so vilely that I cannot make my peace by strangling my own life. Or do you think my children, born as they were born, would be sweet to my eyes? And here, this is kind of like the biggest scene I would kind of pour it into and show how he's like implying like how he's gonna punish himself with the imagery, and like how he's repeating like eyes, like he can't like look at like the people in his family because he knows consequences of his actions. And he goes on to say how he couldn't look at his father, Jocasta, or even look at his own children who should bring him like love and a sense of hope, but like he can't because they're products of him and Jocasta's relationship. And I liked in this quote the House of Death, because when you think of like a home, you think of themes of like love and family, yet he goes on to say how he associates like this house with like death and like the death of his parents, and he feels like he can't even try and like put like back like his family together after he knows what has actually happened. He can't look at them. And then in this scene, this is where I would use that like red harsh lighting to shift to, and like almost have like red backdrops too, like blood like being shown on stage by like a projector, which is kind of going to anticipate how he slashes his eyes out. And these were lines 140 through 154 from scene 4. And then my last quote was just towards the end where I believe it's Tiresias, but he says, "I'm not come to mock you, Oedipus, or to approach you either. If you have lost all respect for man's dignity, at least respect the flame of Lord Helios. Do not allow this pollution to show itself openly here, in the front to the earth, in heaven's rain, and the light of day. No, take him into the house as quickly as you can, for it proper that only the close kindred see his grief." And this was lines 192 through 221, and I like these lines because it kind of is similar to like the religious imagery, and it's kind of talking about like earth and heaven, and I feel like Samuel L. Jackson would have been good at delivering these lines because like I said, I feel like he's very good at playing like a serious character. And I also find it interesting because Tiresias doesn't necessarily like hate, or he's telling everyone to not really hate Oedipus, even though like now we find out that Oedipus kind of has brought the plague to the city and has killed Creon, his father. And yeah, and overall, I wanted to go back to like the themes of my play. I want my play to have like a grungy and like vintage feel to it while keeping like modern day media and ideas. Media such as like the songs I would use, and the ideas like the political side of it. And with the costumes of like the costumes that I used were these. So here's what like the men would wear, including Oedipus, and this is what the woman would wear. Like Jocasta and the woman like in higher power. And I also included like what the chorus would wear, like the poor lower class. I can also link these images to my email, but yeah, I used kind of like costumes from like 1800s Germany, and the props with like the daggers and the wine. I was hoping that would convey like an old and like brooding vibe, and with the like dim and gray lighting, I was hoping to show how like the plague was physically overcasting the city. And I just like to use like the vintage feel because I feel like I personally like it, and I see like an old style kind of coming back into popular culture and modern day media. And I also kind of took inspiration with like the 1800s Germany from the new remake of Nosferatu, which I rewatched recently, and it kind of captures like that old feel like perfectly, like that brooding old feel. So the costumes and the vibes are kind of that I envisioned were inspiring this. And I again with the chorus, I wanted an all female chorus to show the power dynamics in play, and they would be a part of like the lower middle class. And I was hoping that this would hopefully resonate with the audience, especially with elements of dramatic irony. And I think the scene and quote I used where Oedipus describes his punishment and feeling of guilt will be the most interesting. Using a shift of lighting to that yellow harsh lighting, and that red harsh lighting would be mocking like being under investigation or like under a light almost. And I feel like I would have him have his costumes almost falling off his body in this scene to show how he's all over the place and doesn't know where he is. And I'm just hoping that this scene would have the audience at the edge of the seat. And again, I would hope this scene is kind of just like the scene that will really affect the audience with like this production and showing how hard